Okay, so let's talk about UTIs. That's pretty common for women
Yes.
in generally in any health, but obviously menopause as well. That can obviously increase. So do you want to dive into that a little bit for us? And
Yeah, so I mean, there's many factors. They reckon that to have a UTI once a year is quite common for women. Obviously, if you are getting recurrent UTIs, the question for me is always why. If there is that element of further testing in terms of what is the anatomy doing. Some people perhaps have got a smaller bladder, perhaps it's not emptying, perhaps the pipes aren't quite as formed, what else is going on behind the scenes. We've also got to consider bacteria levels. So you can get something called microbiome translocation. So
microbiome
translocation.
right?
So one of the things that a lot of people who get recurrent UTIs are probably asked is, do you wipe from back to front? Because there's that whole, fecal matter being translocated up through the vagina and then obviously urethra. And so that can obviously cause issues with bacteria overgrowth. So, things like E. coli can be a common one with UTIs. And so it's how do we sort of reduce that from becoming overpopulated. So you can also see things like with the vaginal microbiome, it's dominated by lactobacillus species, which produce lactic acid, and that lactic acid prevents bacteria growth. But when you've got things like a disrupted microbiome, this could be due to hormone changes, so hormone fluctuations. Some people see this even through the month. They find towards the latter half of the cycle that they might start getting more thrush-like symptoms. Just as a side note, I know we're talking about UTIs, but just you can see the vaginal microbiome changing. Antibiotic use, which we know disrupts the microbiome, that's something we've known for a long time. Even things like douching, that people talk about vaginal douching, actually it's recommended not to do it because that can all reduce lactobacillus levels, which can also impact UTIs. So something that we sometimes consider, so I'm not an expert in this, I do have colleagues who are, but one thing, if I did have someone who's coming to me, would be to consider either a gut microbiome, a vaginal microbiome, or a urinary microbiome test. You can do all three as well.
Oh wow. Okay.
You have the potential to look at, I'd probably, deciding on the symptoms presented would be looking at, okay, so there's a balance of the individual's finances because these tests obviously come at a cost. But for an individual who is, finding themselves on antibiotics all the time, and we are finding that actually antibiotic use all the time can be not as beneficial for the individual. So what other things can we do? And sometimes by looking at what is the microbiome doing, it can give us a better idea of perhaps what bacteria we need to help populate and how can we do that, whether through certain foods, prebiotic foods, probiotic foods, or do we need to kind of look at specific strains of bacteria just to get them started? You've also got the research around cranberries. There's that whole thing of drink cranberry juice. You do have to flip it on its head though, because a lot of cranberry juice, especially commercially produced, is full of sugar, and sugar feeds bacteria. So we've then got to think about, actually, when I say feeds bacteria, it feeds the not so beneficial bacteria, not the.
Yeah.
So
I take something called demonose, which
okay,
is the extract, and that
yeah,
has helped me a lot.
yeah,
Like if I get that sense, I just start necking water with that in it.
yeah. Fab. And so it's the quality of the cranberry extract that you just mentioned. Apparently, I was reading something. So they believe that there's something in the cranberry that interferes with the adherence of bacteria to the lining of the urinary tract.
Okay.
So it's obviously still something that they're discovering. There's all these things
Yeah.
within anatomy that we're still trying to figure out, especially when we look at more natural derivatives. The research is slowly coming through.
I mean, I've found that this demonose, what I understand it is that it's like a sugar that the gut can't actually absorb, but the bacteria will attach to it and then you pee it out basically. So it's supposed to be a way of trying to clean out the bladder. So but I would it's interesting how you can start to see all the different levels of bacteria going
You
on
can
when you're
through
reading too much.
obviously microbiome tests are constantly developing, but there is a company that I use that do all three. And you can, so I've used them myself for some of the tests, and it's actually really useful to get an idea of what is my microbiome doing, how is that impacting certain symptoms, how I feel, and yeah, I find it absolutely fascinating.
No, it is, and so much research now is literally coming right back down to the microbiome and how that feeds into the mitochondria as well, our DNA. So we're going right on that micro level, aren't we, in terms of
Yes.
understanding. So, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. And I would like to sort of heighten and recognize that UTIs for me has often been anger sitting deep within the system, which is what women aren't really permitted to express so much. But I recognize that was a lot of the anger and the trauma that was sitting, needing to be released.
Yeah.
It's that heat of being pissed off. That's the kind of the emotion that can sit behind. There's me talking about this, and there's you coming through with this very clever, intelligent stuff, and I'm like, yeah, just pissed off. But no, it's the
Yeah, but I think, some of the things that are coming through now, if you look at the research, is sort of showing us what I think a lot of us have known for a long time. But the research, the evidence base isn't there. But we're now starting to see that evidence base. It's trickling through. I mean, if we still look at studies on women's health, it's still very much in the minority. Women's bodies haven't really been studied historically.
No, there's a big gap there. That's something came out from the WHO recently, isn't it? How there needs to be the funding. And but equally, I was interested in seeing how menstrual blood can actually have stem cells in it and how it can help. So
That's
it's,
pretty cool. I
I
mean,
know.
I do know that apparently when you have a miscarriage, that the fetus's DNA stays within the mother and
Mm.
can help heal parts of the body, which I think is pretty cool.
No, and it's equally also when you're fully termed, the body, the mother is feeding the baby, and the baby is also releasing and healing the mother, and those cells that in the blood continue once the baby's born as well. So it's so much beautiful stuff that we're starting to learn, isn't it? And I think
It's pretty cool.
the key is listening to your body, isn't it? And
Yeah.
what's right for you, and getting more information that's needed from yourself, like people like yourself that can do these. So that's brilliant. Love it.